If you believe you're stuck, you're stuck. But if you believe that there is a possibility, then you're well on your way. You have to want it. You have to want it like you've never wanted anything else in your life. I think this is a little disturbing to me that lately there's a lot of conversation that we should just embrace all this diversity of autism and children that are not typical and just become more accepting of it. And I got to be honest with you, I'm shocked because then you're saying that there's nothing you can do about anything. Everything is connected, and I'm here to tell you how. I'm Dr. Laura Hanson with Connect My Brain. This podcast is for moms who are concerned about their child's development. The brain impacts our mind, body, and overall health. I explain how your brain is wired, what happens when it's out of balance, and how early childhood development not only impacts your child, but can affect you as an adult years later. Want to know how to improve your life? Join me and learn about your amazing brain and what it can do for you. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura with Connect My Child's Brain, but I also like to say connect my brain, connect your brain, connect everybody's brain. So let's dive in. I haven't done a solo podcast in a while. And I was really thinking about it going, I just want to do my podcast. I just want to focus on so many things with my audience and tie a lot of ideas together. If you've been following the podcast, you've seen recently I've had all kinds of guests on my podcast. I've had pediatricians, I've had medical doctors, I've had naturopaths, I've had people that work in labs like with the fecal transplants. I hope you listened to that one because Jason did a really good job. But the thing that really intrigued me, first of all, it was great meeting so many people, and there'll be more, but I am going to always do a couple of solos because I enjoy it. And I like to connect dots. That's what I like to do. But the thing that really happened for me through this process so far is realizing that we're all going about this in a very functional way, meaning the ideas of traditional healthcare are really changing. The idea that there has to be one person that looks at your heart, one person that looks at your gut, one person that looks at your skin, whatever the case may be, I see it really changing. Every one of these practitioners that I spoke to looks at the big picture. They look at the person and they realize how human physiology has to be addressed. And I love that because we're all very like-minded. Here at Connect My Brain, we have a mechanical, chemical brain approach. What I also really like is that I've been listening to Dr. Amen's podcast recently, and I love what he said. How many people claim they're working on the brain, but they never look at the brain? Wow. I was thrilled to hear that because we look at the brain. Now, not everybody does brain mapping, and honestly, I think it's a very important part. Everybody can't do everything, but it'd be great if some providers would also think about, let's at least incorporate what's going on with your brain and get a brain map. We certainly have done brain maps for so many people that aren't necessarily involved in our program. So it's like an a la carte. You can have a brain map and take it to whomever that you're working with and let them see your brain. You know, here it is in a nutshell. how this comes together and why I get so intrigued by pediatrics. But regardless, it's not always pediatrics. We have a lot of adults that come here too. But the idea is that no one bypassed this season of their life. Everybody was a baby in the womb. Everybody was a baby on the planet, learning how to crawl, then walk. Everybody went through that journey. And the majority of things coming together happen very early on. So I'm going to give you a couple of points and then I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So there's this thing in the brain called pruning that it begins to happen actually in the womb and goes into the second decade of life, into your 20s. It's called pruning. In the very beginning, they actually call it apoptosis, which means cell death, but I just think that sounds so aggressive, and so I always keep it into the term of pruning. I was actually talking to a behavioral therapist at an expo that I attended last weekend, and I asked him if he knew what pruning meant, and he actually told me no. So when we're working on the brain, when we're working on the person who has a brain, we must always be able to at least know all the body parts that we are influencing. That's why I love what Dr. Amen said. I said, that's perfect. Here's a person who's an elite in his field, and he even recognizes that. It is so important because this pruning aspect, this is what creates the efficiency in the brain. You have all these neurons, you don't get to keep them all. So even what the baby in the womb is practicing is going to get polished up and become efficient to that level before they're ever born. That's why things are working when they get here. But that process isn't done. And in fact, the first 5 years of life, it's really ramping up because now you've got all this sensory motor going on after you're born, and now you're still polishing up pathways. This is what makes circuits. When you come into the world, you're down in your brain stem. You're using more of the back of the brain because that's where the visual cortex is. Visual cortex, how you see. Acuity, meaning clarity, as well as movement. And we've talked about eyes a great deal on this podcast. In autism, they're not pruning efficiently, even in the womb. And in fact, in an assessment, we are now measuring heads because the size of the head is also one of your findings to say something isn't right. And then the why factor comes in. Why is that? So pruning is a very big part. As you come into the world, you're using the back of the brain that is influencing how you see and how you're taking that information into your brain. And different eye movements influence different parts of the brain. And the brain is going to come on in a sequence. That's very important. We are going to really build up that right side of the brain. That's our emotional quotient. And then around anywhere between 16 and 20 months, that data is really going to influence the left side of the brain. And that's where we're going to get our intellectual quotient. And lots of times that pattern is very visible, not only in children, but also in adults. People with any kind of emotional dysregulation, any kind of anxiety, typically there's something going on the right side of the brain. And we can measure this, we can look at it, and then you can support it. Actually speaking to someone this morning that literally told me that there was nothing you could do to change the situation. Basically, they're stuck with it. If you believe you're stuck, you're stuck. But if you believe that there is a possibility, then you're well on your way. You have to want it. You have to want it like you've never wanted anything else in your life. I think this is a little disturbing to me that lately there's a lot of conversation that we should just embrace all this diversity of autism and children that are not typical and just become more accepting of it. And I got to be honest with you, I'm shocked because then you're saying that there's nothing you can do about anything. I believe I've shared this with you before, but one of my children went through a traumatic brain injury a decade ago, and they had to relearn how to walk, talk, eat, toilet, dress themselves. If I had had that attitude, that there's nothing you could do about it, there would have been no change. And their life would have been a devastation. And I know that to be true because when I was sharing this story this morning, I remember very shortly after the hospital stay was done, we were shopping at IKEA looking for a desk, and there was a gentleman there who it was very obvious that he had had a craniectomy, meaning that he had had a traumatic brain injury. The pressure was so great, they had to remove a plate from the cranium. And then once that acute part has resolved, if it works out, they'll go put the plate back on the brain. But you could see the distortion in his head shape. And you could also really feel and see the depressiveness of function. And when we were talking to him and sharing our story, he looked at me and he said, "How did you know to do all of that?" Wow, what a response. Because I actually heard that same response from the neurologist's PA, because a couple of times I had to get, some type of requisition to be able to go do something. And she asked me that same question. Now, this is the PA working for the neurologist. And he's a neurosurgeon. And she asked me the same thing. How do you know to do all of this? My response to her, I did not say this to the young man, but my response to her was, I don't know how you don't. There is a world out there. There is so much available. There are so many things that you can do to improve the state of function outside of this traditional model of healthcare that we've been in. That you got a problem, the only thing you need to do is go get a medication, go get a surgery, and deal with it. And nothing could be further from the truth. You have a sequence of events that go on, and they're very early in life. And this is for everybody, regardless if we're talking about a child or an adult. Like I said, nobody bypassed this season in their life. And now, if something is going on, be willing. Be willing to fight for your ability to change. Look at everything you possibly can. Find the things that are the right fit for you and go after it. I had a little boy in here this morning, and he's just about 8 years old, and he's really changing. That's such a big time between 7.5 and 8.5. And on earlier podcasts, we've talked about the subconscious mind. It's forming from the time you're in the womb until about 7.5 to 8.5. That's why what goes on for you as a parent is so influential into the well-being of your child. This particular family, unfortunately, had spent 5+ years in the traditional healthcare model. And by the time they found me, I'm telling them things that they had never heard. And he even shared with me this morning that someone else, a therapist, as a matter of fact, Why are you spending so much money on buying these supplements for the gut? Why are you doing all of this? Because he's only 7.5. Why would you stop? That is on the grown-up. It is not on the child. It is on the grown-up. You have to fight for the well-being of your child. You have to look under every rock and make sure you're not missing something. We have too much information today to keep you from not doing that. You have to realize that the body is innately designed to heal. Just look at an old-fashioned paper cut. You don't keep bleeding for years on end, right? It usually stops within moments. What did that? Did you put super glue on it? Did you hold it together? You might have put a paper towel around it, squeezed it, helped coagulate the blood cells, and then it seals. You have the most incredible ability in your body to heal. And if you give it the right things, and if you go and you listen to every one of these podcasts that's on my studio or channel or whatever you call it, everybody's saying the same thing. Think about the fecal transplant. Do you understand what that means? And listen to Jason's podcast. It's terrific. First of all, there's an incredible screening process. So don't just put it out of your head. You have to be between the ages of 10 and 30. You had to have been a vaginal birth, breastfed, and no red flags in your family. So you can imagine the picking pool is very small. And then what they're doing, you can even now bring it, it all goes into a laboratory process. It gets cleaned, all that kind of stuff. But it literally can be put in capsule form now. I was blown away by that. And I've got a couple of kids. We're going to set out on a journey to make that happen because they need as much help as we can put in there without wrecking the nervous system. So many of these children are so dysregulated that their emotions are all over the place. It's either they're all over the place and you might call them hyperactive, or they're literally withdrawn and dampened from everything. It's both ends of the spectrum. And I don't mean the autism spectrum. I mean just like if I use a bar graph going, this one's all revved up and this one's really revved down. Our children are suffering, and you have an opportunity to make the change. And when you pull the whole family into the process, it is life-changing. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to do, I hope I can get it accomplished in August. This is August 1st, as a matter of fact. But we're going to start doing what we call scan days for adults. When I got into neurofeedback, it was in 2008. And I was invited by a colleague, Dr. Barwell, to come down and look at this software because he wanted me to teach primitive reflexes. When I saw this piece of equipment, which is called a NeuroInfinity, I was blown away because for the first time, I had a piece of diagnostic equipment, because I love data. I had a piece of diagnostic equipment that allowed me to measure the stress response. Now that's huge. So connect the dot to the primitive reflex. That is the Moro reflex. Moro reflex starts around 8.5 weeks of pregnancy. It is going to bring about the arousal, the CO2-O2 reflex, and the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is that same word, fight or flight. And there's lots of podcasts on that particular reflex. Go back, type it into the search bar on the website, connectmybrain.com, and you can do deeper dives into these individual reflexes. So this particular software is measuring the stress response. What's included in that is looking at the breath, looking at respiration, breath, meaning the pace of the breath, and is it in rhythm with the heart rate? That's called heart rate variability. Looking at respiration for the amount of work going into that. Skin conduction, which is sweating. And then temperature. You got cold hands and feet. You got cold hands and feet, you're in chronic stress. And then muscle tone. And actually, the leads also go on the brain so that you can see what happens to the brain waves throughout the stressors. And this is so important. You know, we talk about stress like it's, let me pull a tissue out of a box. Stress is a measurable physiological event. And if you get locked in this pattern, your physiology is changing. Your physiology is not working the way that it should. You don't get blood flow going everywhere. You don't get it in your gut. You don't get it to the front of your brain. Your eyeballs have lots of blood vessels in them. You don't get to absorb food. You get damage to your gut, like leaky gut, typically leading to leaky liver and leaky brain, and now leaky throat. This is a real component. And I'm going to first start with parents, but anybody would be welcome to come out and have a scan and take a look at their own well-being. This is vital for you to know what state is your autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system means it runs automatically. You don't tell yourself to take a deep breath. You don't tell your heart to beat. You don't tell the gastric juices to come down and begin to break down food. You don't tell your cerebral spinal fluid and your blood flow in your brain to do what it's supposed to do. These are things that run automatically. And that autonomic nervous system has two parts: fight or flight, rest, feed, and breed. So fight or flight, cold hands and feet, poor digestion, just anxious, fatigued, overwhelmed, or go 180 degrees the other direction and be low motivation, depression. Now, what about the other side of the coin? Rest, feed, and breed. What about infertility? What about anything having to do with the ability to sleep? All those things are components of the parasympathetic system. So what you should really begin to say to yourself is, you know what, that sounds like then this is the precursor to things going bad or going south in your body. And it is. It absolutely is. In fact, one of the very first things we learn in our higher levels of neurofeedback training is you must break the arousal pattern. So arousal in babyland has to do with the rhythmicity of that little baby waking up ready to feed. So about every 2.5 to 3 hours, a newborn should be startled inside of themselves and wake up because glucose is going to be used in the brain faster than any other part of the body. So waking up, being alert, being ready to go. In our school age kids, if you're under aroused, that's going to be associated with attention deficit. You don't have the fuel to get yourself up and going. Now, attention is absolutely a developmental journey, and everybody has the capacity to pay attention. In fact, my next solo, I'm going to do a lot of work on attention and interoception. But for right now, simplicity, under-aroused children, they have a lot of slow waves. They have a lot of underpower waves in their brain, but they also have a very typical high carbohydrate diet rather than protein. Please feed your child protein before they go to school. If not, by, I don't know, let's say they leave your house at 8-ish, by 9-ish, they're crashing. And the teacher's going to look at them and go, oh, this kid can't pay attention. And then you're going to start going down that rabbit hole. Now, the other side of the coin is over-aroused. This is going to be our kids with hyperactivity responses. meaning that they just cannot regulate and they just spiral. And adults can have the same thing going on too. And so we have to look at this. We have to look at the physiology. We have to look at the chemistry, and we have to look at the brain so that we can put the pieces together, create that individual plan that is going to allow that person to change. And if you do the work, you can't help but change. Think about, if I want to lose weight. Okay, I'm going to watch my calorie. I'm going to make sure I'm exercising. And if I keep that up, I should be able to lose weight. I should be able to get tone. I should be able to get my muscles going, right? Now, if I only throw it in a couple of times a week, no, you're not going to get the same kind of response. So you have to have an intensity and a frequency to turn the ship in the other direction. Now, I want to spend the last few minutes just kind of giving you an update what's going on over here at Connect My Brain. We have excellent intensive programs here, and anyone and everyone is invited to do an intensive program if that's the right fit. But we also want you to know, like I said at the beginning of our podcast, maybe you're working with somebody and you just love what's going on. You could come and just have a brain map. Maybe you want to try our pulse table. You can come in and just do pulse. We have a lot of golfers that like to come in and use our pulse table. We have red light therapy. We have chiropractic care, neurologically based chiropractic care, and you can come in just for that. So this is a holistic approach to addressing your body and addressing your brain. So keep that in mind. Now, the other thing is our kits are available on connectmybrain.com under how you can work with us. Click on shop. So the parent kit is designed to help parents understand how to work with your child if any of this is resonating with you and you go, wow, my child is really stressed out. It's a way for you to dip your toe in wherever you are, because you will be able to follow a very simple little program. Now, it's not a program of all the things that we do, because I don't think that's really safe to put stuff like that out there. But it is a way for you to truly understand stress, connect the dot to the Moro reflex. There's actually a little quiz in the parent book to help you rate numerically where do you think your child lands when it comes to stress. And then there are some regulation cards, little activities that you can do throughout the day that are simple. There is also some tools in there, a pulse oximeter and a breathing pacer, all in line with everything that we've been talking about. You also get access to our foundational stability method exercises. And it's just a really simple way to get your child moving, to get you really understanding that if you get that child's body regulated, you will see a change. And then we hope your next step is you're going to do a full-blown consultation with us. And you feel free too to do the exercises right alongside of them. You know, that's one of the things I've always enjoyed. When I see families that are very dedicated to the cause, the outcomes are always fantastic. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you got some pearls. And if you know somebody that could really benefit from this information, share the podcast and be on the lookout. We want to give you access to our newsletter. So as soon as it gets posted, I will let you know. But we're going to add a button, subscribe to our newsletter. And that way you can get some more information right there in your email box. Remember, it's connectmybrain.com, and we look forward to talking to you soon. And as always, be blessed. Thanks for listening. I hope today's lesson will help you or someone you love. Do you have a question or just really want to talk to somebody about brains? Connect with me over on Facebook or Instagram at Connect My Brain. Looking to understand and optimize your particular brain? Check out connectmybrain.com for course information and resources. See you next class.